All right, now we are ready to talk about some of the material this week. This week's lecture is going to be pretty short, and we really are focusing on the domains of the behavioral sciences. Sometimes we kind of get lost and just call our field ABA, but technically that's not very precise. When we talk about the domains, what we're really talking about is the different components what makes up the behavioral sciences, and that's more than just ABA. When I talk about the domains, I'm talking about 4 different areas of work and interest in our field. The first is behaviorism. The second is the experimental analysis of behavior, and you might have heard of EAB. The third is actual applied behavior analysis, or ABA, which may not be exactly what you think of it as. And the fourth is professional practice. It's important to realize that each of these fields is interconnected in some way, and as BCBAs, you may work in multiple domains of behavior analysis at the same time, or you may focus solely on one area. Even if you choose to do this, the other areas will affect your work at some point. I really hope that everyone can name who the man in the picture is. That's B.F. Skinner. And the reason that he's included on the slide of behaviorism is that behaviorism is really the theoretical basis for the science of behavior. All of the other domains in EAB and ABA, and honestly professional practice to a point, are based on the foundation of behaviorism. And who discovered the principles of behaviorism? None other than B.F. Skinner. There are many, many different details that make up behaviorism, but really there's an essential foundation of what the theoretical foundation of behaviorism includes. One of those things is that Skinner noted that psychology is a science of behavior, and what this, how this is different than a lot of different theoretical or philosophical conceptualizations of psychology is that it doesn't include the mind as a separate context. It doesn't include any theory of mind. Behavior itself is the area of interest, and that's a really important point. As such, behavior can be explained without any mentalistic constructs. You don't need to talk about things that happen within the body when explaining things that happen outside of the body. Sometimes we are interested in this. However, it's not necessary. So, as I hope at this point many of you have gotten comfortable talking about, behavior happens for other reasons, not because someone thought about doing something or because somebody felt some way. Explanations of behavior founded in behaviorism do not include that. On the other hand, what they do include is some analysis of the environment, right? The person or animal's environment is what affects changes in their behavior and how their conditioning history occurs, and behavior will be explained because of the environment, remembering that as behaviorists, the environment can involve both external and internal stimuli. And the really important point is then that you're describing behavior in a parsimonious and conceptually systematic manner. What is important here is, remember when we're talking about parsimony, it's the most simple explanation needs to be ruled out before considering more complex explanations. And conceptually systematic, we're talking about explanations that are founded in the basic principles of behavior, not by some kind of theory of mind, not any mentalistic constructs, but the basic principles of behavior. Another area of, or an area that kind of stems out of behaviorism is the analysis of events that can't be explained with any data that we have right now. This is considered the conceptual analysis of behavior, where different researchers or different authors will provide potential explanations based on the science of behavior of things like internal events. Thinking about it, perseverative thoughts are something that happens covert, right? It happens within the body. A conceptual analysis of this type of behavior may include a number of different potential explanations. However, the conceptual analysis will only include those founded within the basic principles of behavior, no mind or mentalistic explanations. One of the areas or the domains that is really affected by behaviorism or came out of behaviorism is the experimental analysis of behavior. And what this involves is basic research or research about the principles themselves. The focus or the purpose of the experimental analysis of behavior is to determine the effects of different processes on behavior, determine what the principles are and how they affect behavior in different ways. There is no emphasis on how it affects anyone's life or makes anything better. It's just what makes these principles. Why does this happen? And what can be determined from there. One thing that's really important is that there's the assumption that experimental analysis of behavior happens like this picture on the right, that there's a pigeon in a lab, a rat in a lab. But a lot of experimental analysis of behavior has been conducted in other settings than a laboratory and can involve human behavior. There's actually an entire special interest group of ABAI that is the experimental analysis of human behavior, because it hasn't been a focus in the literature as heavily as the experimental analysis of animal behavior or non-human behavior. One of the things to remember is when we're talking about the basic principles, there are going to be 4 basic principles that everyone includes in their analysis. It's going to be reinforcement, punishment, extinction, and stimulus control. At times, motivating operations may be included, schedules of reinforcement may also be included, and potentially respondent conditioning. But the experimental analysis of behavior will address all of these things. Additionally, remember that all of the different technologies that we speak of as behavior analysts in any fashion are going to be founded in those basic principles. So it's not just that the experimental analysis of behavior focuses on very simplistic reinforcement procedures. However, any different technologies that have come from those basic principles will be addressed in experimental analysis of behavior. And here's a list of just very few that may be things that you don't necessarily think about. And now we're in for lecture check-in question number 3. So this will be the third question, remembering that the first 2 came from the course description this week. So what you want to think about is the following question, which is, which of the following may be studied in the experimental analysis of behavior? So basically thinking, which of the following would be a topic of basic research? I'm hoping the answer came to you pretty quickly, and you will record A, interval schedules of reinforcement. So along with the questions from the previous lecture, record this letter because you can include it in your lecture check-in. Now let's discuss what I'm going to assume is the domain that everyone believes they are most familiar with, and my guess is that that is going to change after we talk about it. Um, the work that's involved in the domain of applied behavior analysis is actually applied research. Um, so that's what you want to be thinking about when you're thinking about applied behavior analysis. You're looking at, or what applied behavior analysts do, is take the findings from experimental analysis of behavior and apply them to socially significant situations, which is included in other definitions of ABA that you've talked about. So, really, the interest is how those basic principles can be applied to develop technologies that will lead to socially significant behavior change. As part of that, we use single subject designs, and social validity measures are very important. Social validity measures would not be utilized in the experimental analysis of behavior. The goal of applied behavior analysis is to develop technologies and not necessarily change someone's life or one person's life or one organism's life, but to develop those technologies that can lead to that. The domain of the behavioral sciences that may most frequently be confused with ABA is the area of professional practice. And this is where those technologies are utilized to actually provide socially significant behavior change programs to individuals in need. The purpose is to provide a behavior analytic based interventions. And this includes things that you've talked about in a number of your different classes: the design, implementation, and evaluation of programs based on based on behavior analysis. And thinking about it, it really makes sense that the basic principles are studied in EAB, then studied again in socially significant situations in ABA, and what professional practice does is brings them to an area where they could be useful in the world. So EAB is not only an area that's just there because of interest, but ultimately, when you bring it to professional practice, it can be utilized to make meaningful change. Remembering that frequently these domains can be looked at together, you can address them together. So, in a lot of situations, people engaging in professional practice will also engage in applied behavior analysis, doing research to further the science of ABA. Others will have a sole focus on research, and still others will solely be engaged in professional practice. Remembering that once you're engaged in professional practice, if you start to develop technologies that need research, you're responsible to engage in some applied behavior analysis within that professional practice. Another area that it's really worth talking about is the area of translational research. And talking about translational research has emerged over a little bit of time. And what it's looking at is research that's involving those basic principles, that basic research and applied research together. Really, what you're looking at is the replication of of basic research or an experiment in basic research in an applied setting or with an applied population or with an applied problem. Typically, there's one variable from the applied domain that will be utilized in an experiment to make it translational, so that you're going from research solely focused on some principle of behavior, but seeing how it can be allocated to an applied scenario, which this area of research has really increased for a number of years and is becoming pretty popular within the behavior analytic literature. With this increase of translational literature, a number of different clinical practice have emerged or been strengthened because of the combination of basic and applied research, some of which are listed here, but there really are very many more. I would believe that the area of translational research would be a growing field that would be of interest to maybe some of you. All right, and now you have your last check-in question for the week. Which of the following domains is the most important of the behavioral sciences? I hope this one was very, very clear, but I'll still give you a couple seconds. And the answer is D. Because of the interrelationship, all of the domains are important and equally important. So now that you have all of your lectures completed, take the answers from questions 1, 2, 3, and 4 and enter them in the quiz marked Lecture Check-in for Week 1. Only the letter will be available, and you will get your score immediately. I look forward to hearing all of your introductions on the discussion board this week, and make sure to touch base if there's any need.